Welcome to this week's podcast. I'm here today with the first team manager, Malcolm. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So today I want to talk about your life before football. If you'd like to tell me about that.
So obviously, like most kids, I started playing football at primary school. Actually started playing as a goalkeeper. And then I went to secondary school and wanted to play a bit more outfield, but our PE teacher was more into rugby and things like that. So when he used to set up games against other schools, he used to just get one or two lads to go around and organise it themselves. So it became a case of they picked their best mates, whether they could kick a ball or not half the time. So because I wasn't in the in crowd, I tended not to play too much. So I sort of had a few years off playing at school, but I still played for a local club in Hereford called Hinton. Won a few trophies there for under 14s and under 16s and all the junior age groups. We had quite a good side back then. Then joined the army at 16 and didn't play football for a couple of years. I was more into cross country and athletics. And then when I was about 18, resumed playing back in Hereford again for Hinton again as an adult team, and then moved to Bartestry, where I had quite a few years of some good football there, playing at a decent level. And then moved up to Yorkshire and played for Pateley Bridge for a season. Enjoyed it there, but then stepped up a level to play for Ripon Red Arrows with some really good footballers in the area and scored quite a few goals, surprisingly. My career was a bit the opposite to most players, in the fact that as you get older, you tend to start dropping back down the pitch from a striker to a midfielder and then to a defender, whereas I went the other way. So I started in goal as a kid and then played centre-half when I lived in Hereford. Then I went out to full-back and then ended up playing in the centre midfield and like dictating the tempo of the game and things like that. And I never made it up to the striker, though. And then after that, Chloe, my daughter, used to come to football with me most weekends from the age of like 2 or 3. So at half time, I'd be kicking the ball around with her rather than listening to the team talk. And she obviously had a natural ability even at that age. And then when it got to an age where she could join a club up in Ripon, I took her along to Panthers while I was still playing then on a Saturday. And after about 2 or 3 sessions, it became apparent that the person that was coaching the team at the time wasn't really interested and asked me if I would take over, which I did. And that sort of brought the curtain down on my playing career, as all my time was then spent travelling with Panthers all the way to like Scarborough and places like that most weekends to go and play football with the young uns.
Cool. So as you mentioned, you were in the army. Do you have any interesting stories from the army?
Nothing particularly. My career was only 5 years, so like I said, I went straight from school and did an apprenticeship at Chepstow, where I learnt a trade, and then I went to Gibraltar Barracks in Camberley to do combat engineering course before being posted up to Ripon. Did a tour of Bosnia in '95, and then come back to Ripon after that. And I left the army in '97, but it was a good time. And like I said, did mostly cross country and athletics rather than football in there. So, but I had some good success in that. Represented the army and the combined services in cross country. And when I was at basic training, actually broke the record for the fastest BFT, which is a basic fitness test, 1.5 mile run in a squad, and then 1.5 mile best effort. Probably struggle to run 1.5 mile now, to be honest, though.
Yeah, it might fall over a bin now.
Yeah, definitely.
So I believe you were a boxer as well, were you not?
I did a little bit of boxing, but only at squadron level. So wasn't like regimental boxing where you go to other camps. It was just a regiment has usually like four squadrons or so in a unit. So then it was just like inter squadron. So yeah, I had 4 fights in my professional amateur career, whatever you want to call it, and was undefeated. 4 fights, 4 wins, and retired before I lost my good looks.
So, as you mentioned, you became the coach of Ripon Panthers. What was a dream before coaching?
As in for football, or
what you want to do in
general?
general in the future when you were younger?
Well, like so, when I was a kid, I just wanted to join the army. My dad was in the army, but he was in the infantry. But growing up, he said, if you go in the army, don't go in the infantry. Get yourself a trade and get something to fall back on, which is what I did. Because I'm doing my trade now in civilian street. So wise words, I guess, from my dad. But yeah, as a kid, that's all I wanted to do was join the army. But then when I did, I think it just didn't quite live up to my expectations. But looking back on my time now, if I did it again, I'd probably look to get posted somewhere else rather than leave the army altogether. Yeah. But then after that, yeah, I've just settled into my trade and everything's going well so far.
Awesome. So you obviously started out with Ripon City Panthers, and that then led to making the ladies team. Can you just tell us about that process and how that developed from the youth squad to the senior squad?
Yeah. So when I took over at Ripon City Panthers, I think the girls were maybe 10, and so we had the likes of Demi and Chloe and Georgie that were playing for me then, even at that age. And then Emily came along and joined us. She was always a little bit too young to play in our age group, but she used to join in with us at training, and then eventually she managed to get some games, which was good. And then Lizzie joined us as well. I think she joined us from Knaresborough Celtic. So we've brought on 5 or 6 players from Panthers into the senior team, and all that came about because when they got to 16, there was nowhere else for them to go, really. There wasn't an under-18s league at the time, and they wanted to carry on playing football. And so we just put the word out that we were looking to start an open age team, even if it was just going to be for the odd little friendly game. And we had quite a bit of interest from all different standards of players. Even the likes of Demi's mum came along and had a few games, which was great to see. But our success was instant, which was quite surprising. We turned up for our first league game against Farsley Celtic, who were a really well-known ladies football setup, and we was expecting to get turned over, but we actually won 12-0, I think, on our first ever game competitively, which was a nice surprise, I guess.
Nice.
But then it just went on from then. So obviously, as we grew in our success, players became aware of us and inquired about coming along. And then some of the players that had joined us literally, and they'll admit that they came just to keep the team going and make up numbers, were happy to step away and let the younger ones continue, shall we say. But when we had our first season, we started off as the ladies team. We were still as Ripon Panthers, and Gary Campbell-John approached us from Ripon City and said, would we be interested in coming over to join the club at some point? But it became obvious, really, that the Panthers, being a junior club, wasn't the right setup for the ladies, as there was a social side to playing as well, and Ripon City had the facilities to accommodate us in that respect. And obviously, junior football to adult football is a different setup as well for the admin side of things. So with the secretary and getting us into different leagues and the insurance and all the paperwork and stuff that goes on beyond that. And that's where we are now. Obviously, we've had 4 or 5 seasons now with some good progress, a cup win, and hopefully another one in a couple of weeks.
Yep. So what I want to ask you now is, for you, what sets women's football apart from the men's football?
What sets it apart? Difficult one, that. I think we're a smaller group, obviously, than the men. The men at Ripon have got 4 or 5 teams, I think. different age groups and different abilities, whereas we're just one group, so we don't have as big an issue as they might in respect of getting team together. You know, we've got a committed little group of players with quality throughout. But I would like to say that there's not a difference now in the way that men and women's football's portrayed. Obviously, there's a lot more money in the men's game, but I know quite a lot of people now that would quite happily sit and watch ladies' football as much as they would men's, whereas 10 years ago, even the thought of a women's football match on telly would have been probably sniggered at. But the standards improving all the time, and it's getting the respect it deserves now, as well as the media coverage. So it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously we're in the semi-final this Sunday. Hopefully we can get to the final the week after. What are your hopes for pre-season and the coming season? Is there any teams you'd like to play in pre-season?
There's nobody particularly that I'd rush out and say, right, we definitely need to play them. But we've got certain targets that we want to look at. So we ideally like to play teams that we've never played before, if possible. So there's teams at the same sort of level as us in the North Riding that we might be targeting, and possibly the leagues above us, you know, just to test ourselves. Because it might be nice to start off with a so-called easier game for the first game, just to get some fitness in the legs. But then before the season starts, we need to have a couple of really good tests, just to see where we are and, you know, what the potential is going forward for the season. Because ideally, I think we've got the ability to get promoted out of our league next season with the group of players that we've got. So obviously, it'd be nice if we retained everybody and added one or two, just to give a bit of more competition in different positions. Because what we've got now is probably 18 players who are there pretty much week in, week out, and on match days, and the majority of them would get into pretty much any team in our division, I think. We've got a nice blend of experience and youth as well. So if the young ones keep listening and keep coming along and putting in the work, there's no reason they won't develop into the players that play around them week in, week out. The likes of Jess Barnes and, you know, the Chloes and the Faith Martins of the team.
Cool. Well, that's all I've got for you today. So thank you very much for coming on and talking to me. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. You're welcome.
So yeah, that's all for this week. See you next week. Don't forget to click right down there to subscribe, and some more videos on the screen now for you to click. Podcast, the other thing, the match days. See you next time.